Okay, that should be long enough. Now, as you recall from a couple of episodes ago, I used some little recycled aluminum cylinders to demonstrate how triangular numbers might work. And you'll notice, here's that symbol again, sigma, and here we use the number 3. And it just so happens that if you take the sum of 3 twice, and you can represent, of course, as we know because of our laws, didn't matter which way you list the numbers, because they're going to come out the same twice. And what happens is, when you array them in this fashion, one above the other, and just shift them, you'll see that if you imagine a 0 here and a 0 over this end, well, when we put those numbers together, we get nothing but 3s. In fact, we get 4 3s. And we could represent it like this: 3 times 3, here it is, in parentheses, plus another 3. And the shortcut, typical scientific method, is to put that 2 right above that 3 there in parentheses. And if it were some other symbol and not a number, or if it were a letter or some other thing, wouldn't even need parentheses if it was just simple. And there it is, 3 squared plus another 3. 4 3s, or 3 4s, and here's a little other thing, this little upside down, or rather the V here, looks like a V. It's called a logical operator. It's on one of these charts here somewhere. There it is. And there's its complement, the and symbol. And those are very important, especially when you start talking about binary operations and something called Boolean algebra, which figures very, very heavily into a lot of complex processes, which really ultimately can be simplified into some very simple equations. Complex sentences can be reduced down to equations, and then the Boolean algebra, if you'd ask a question, will give you a truth. And you can build up relationships, and we call those decision logic tables, but never mind about that. And there is some applicability to the human condition when you start thinking about this. But this is very inspirational stuff, what can be extracted from, say, aligning some of the numbers. These came from Genesis. There's a 1 5 3 and a 4 3 4, but they weren't really, maybe never intended to be analyzed in this fashion, but as you can see, they just happen to be there. Kind of, imagine a box of numbers, and I just shook it a little bit, and instead of justifying all the numbers as we do in our Greco-Western environment, the numbers are always justified with zeros on the right side. Well, let's just pretend we did it the other way, or even forget about zeros completely. And look what might happen here. Why, we get these alternating sequences of 4s and 3s. Down here it becomes 3s and 2s. And kind of it's the same thing happening here. Because if we would imagine a tessellation, if you will, or a whole sheet just of 1s and 2s, 1s and 2s is alternating either direction. I took one little block of them. You see they're just opposite, a mirror image of each other, the 1 2 and the 2 1. And you do with any numbers like that. For instance, 13 and 31 will give you 44. 14, 41, you add those two together, that's 55. And these mirror opposites, another intriguing phenomenon that you can just see when you start analyzing the principle of summation. And again, we talked about those little laws that we learned by doing these operations that involve one operation for a bunch of numbers, whether it be multiplication or addition. Those laws of association and commutation, rearranging in any fashion you like, as long as you use them once, the result is the same. And there's another principle which is equally as important if you want to do more complex kind of things. And that's called the distribution formula, the law of distribution, the axiom regarding that, and all the little sub-theories that might go with it. But it's a principle that can be derived from this very same little exercise. And here, as you can see, we distribute this number, whatever it is, any number, it could be 3 again, and we multiply it by what's outside the parentheses, and that's n. And there's another number inside these parentheses, and that's just 1, so 1 times anything is n, and here we're dividing it by 2. And beneath this is, in this case, we use the x. I used x, I could have used q, any number, any symbol rather, and here it's squared, plus x over 2. And these are really the same thing. And this is just one illustration of the law of distribution. We could actually have two things, and then we'd have to distribute each one over each one. And it may seem complicated, but you can actually hold 4 numbers in your head, which is what they teach you in algebra if you want to learn these shortcuts. You can write things down, but after a while it just becomes second nature. You can recognize that 30 minus 1 is 29. And if you want to multiply 29 by 29, that might seem horrifically difficult, but if you can just see 30 minus 1 times 30 minus 1, or any number of things like that, you know, writing it down makes the job twice as easy. And it's just an exercise, because these are other ways of showing you how these principles of geometry and mathematics work together. And right in this very same framework, we can illustrate another principle, and that is what we call unity. And that is the identity. That one will be one, no matter how you wish to express it. For instance, this upper part of this little note here and this lower part, when viewed as a whole, could be seen as what we call a fraction, but it's an identity because everything up here will be the same as everything down here, no matter what number you put in there. And that's an identity, because anything divided by itself is still 1. Now, we're going to kind of leave sums alone for a while and these laws and not tarry on that too much. We're going to get back to that, because this is how we make some rather quick analyses, short work of some long problems. Now here again, there's more to meets the eye in Genesis here. Here's the 11th chapter again. These are the descendants of Noah along Shem's line. And here is, Arpachshad was born. He's the first son. And way down at the bottom is Terah. These are, I think, about 10 generations. And what I have here in brackets are a different way of saying 35. It would say 5 plus 30 here. And here this individual was 2 plus 30 years. And in this case, 9 plus 20. Why there and not everywhere, I really don't understand. And like I said, this is a different version. But of course, there's that 153, which we found in the Kings, which highlighted a 434. And it's a curious kind of coincidence that it's here again. And again, if you pull these zeros out, we can see we're getting, I don't know, possibly 77s here. We'll get 11 and 9 again. 1, 5, 3, and 11. I don't even know what the relevance this might be to octal or any other number system. And speaking of number systems, let's throw this tidbit in here. There is another kind of rudimentary. Of course, it's archaic now because the number of bytes or bits, I don't know how you talk about these things anymore, but hexadecimal is very old school, and it was utilized back in the day when an individual could read what was called a core dump, and by looking at the registers and understanding what was supposed to be the program, might be able to make sense of where something went wrong and perhaps why. And now you would probably have to have some degree of this accomplished within the machine itself. It would literally be beyond the means of an individual to really figure out what went wrong. But of course, everyone uses prepackaged systems, so therein lies the rub. What's manufactured and promulgated throughout all these systems may in fact be inherent within the hardware itself. And that's the way that goes. My computer's faster than yours, and guess what? And they make them extremely faster all the time. So, anyway, pointless to talk about that. You'll notice again I've utilized that upside down V to indicate OR, and I use that a lot. And I'm gonna have to go back and refresh my memory on what they call inductive reasoning and truth tables, but it's fun stuff. Maybe I'll be able to show you some examples of this in the very pages of the Bible. In fact, we've already kind of did one. Let me see now. Was that Solomon or was it the birds? Remember? They neither toil nor reap. Oh yes, that's it. The Lord feeds them. Neither and nor. It's a very, very interesting statement, because neither nor is one of the, say, exclusive, exacting Boolean algebraic statements that, if not carefully constructed, can be completely misleading. Anyway, we won't dwell any more on that, and we'll move right along to, well, I said I was going to talk about Plato, so let me bring this down, and we'll see if we can't bring him to the fore right now. Okay, I'll have to hold this up a little bit. Oh, here's a specimen. Here is an example of your typical input feed into a computer for all purposes. This is, of course, is an old check, and I just saved it because it's a joke. It costs more to print it than it's worth. Okay, so let's bring this down now, and we'll be brief here. Now, Plato, again, number 153. I show it here again in Genesis. Of course, is again in Genesis, the very first chapter, where in verses 26 and 27, God creates them. And of course, in 27, He created them male and female. So we're talking about a pair. Well, if you look at that, there's two consecutive numbers, 26, 27, in the first chapter. Well, anyway, you could look at it that way if you so choose. Why not? And of course, in the 53rd verse, which will be in the second chapter, there's a little more going on having to do with this aspect of creation. But we're going to have to get back to this because the 23rd verse of creation is just interesting on its face because of the fact that it's 23. And, well, we'll have more to say about that. But what's really especially interesting about Genesis, first chapter, 26th verse, it says, let us, look at this, let us make man in our image. So, let us make this other being in our image. So, who are we? Why, we're the gods, right? So this is an interesting thing about the Bible itself, as it is about monotheism. And yet, right here in the beginning, on its face, after it explains that God made the heavens and the earth, or the whole universe, and in a particular structured, distinct time periods we're calling days, gods, plural, come into the picture and make man. So we have some little discrepancy here, but maybe it's not that confusing, because remembering that the holy books are meant to guide us instructionally, to give us ideas, to remind us, all of them, that the face of, quote, the Creator is terrifying and unfathomable. And any who live after beholding what they believe is the face of God, they have to consider themselves very fortunate indeed. So obviously, there needs to be some distinctions made between the incomprehensible, unfathomable Creator of all that is, and permeates all that is, was, and ever will be, and in a sense that we can't even begin to comprehend ourselves. We may call this, if we wish, some aspect of extra-dimensional realities. All these things are quite possible. But let's go to another source. And I said Plato. And just to be consistent with the numbers, before we do Plato, we'll treat it as we would the Bible. Here I have Homer. Homer predates the philosopher Plato. And I'm going to mention something about that very word, philosopher, in just a moment. But if you notice, typically it does have two parts, although they put them together. And there's a good reason for that, because once upon a time, there was only the Iliad. And a little bit while later, someone also named Homer wrote the Odyssey. And the hero of the Odyssey is called Odysseus. This is one little interesting thing. And I haven't really committed a lot of attention to the actual numerical analysis of any of these Greek books. I mean, I've just scratched the surface now, but this is such beautiful stuff. And imagine, this is translated from the English, but yet it has a tempo to it, and it rhymes. And here's the fifth book read this because it's so beautiful. This said, the sun set and earth's shadows gave, when these two left love no rights undone. The early morn up he rose, put on his in and out weed. She herself in chases amidst a white robe, full of all the graces, ample and pleated, thick, like fishy scales. A golden girdle then your waist impales. And I won't go any further, but as you can see, and this is very, very, very long stuff, and it's pretty, but the experts say that pretty as it is, and as Greek as original is, something subtle in this gives away the fact that it could not have been the writing of the same individual or individuals, as the case may be. Anyway, this is a story after the Trojan War. Of course, the Iliad is about that, but it could very well represent an actual historical portrayal of the world at that time. 17 days. Calypso promises Odysseus, or Ulysses is sometimes called, fair weather on his journey back home to Ithaca, his home. And it's just full of tragedies, and so many of these are reminiscent of some of the acts that are done in the Old Testament, where I can't even remember his name. A certain king actually makes a promise that he will sacrifice the first living creature that he sees that comes out to greet him after he's victorious in battle, and who should come out to see him but his own daughter. And oh my God, these kinds of stories where the female is involved in these tragedies, and in this case, this is the most mind-blowing of all, is that they don't say what type of sacrifice, is made, but the girl is offered up and she willingly goes. And I just can't believe it, that they want you to understand that this kind of thing was literally happening. So it happens in the Greek stories, and it happens in the Bible. Let me show you something else about this. And here's another book I'm reading, and it's dealing with the same subject. Here's what it says. And of course, we're going to call this, what, mythology? It says, there are many gods. At the highest level of creation are the gods, who are in continual conflict with the demonic forces. Humans look at the gods as powers to be appeased or controlled. Gods often interact with humans, marry them, give them weapons, invoke their assistance or aid them. Gods communicate with men. Animals talk and are sometimes real animals. Sometimes human beings are gods. And you would think that, that's just the way those Greeks, were pretty interesting people, to say the least. But what I just read to you is just a condensed version of what's called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata it's supposed to contain this guy here, Bhagavad Gita, as it is. And so it's, it's not rendered in this, because this is, according to what it says inside here, it's compilation. And so just like, we have these Greek works, and we finally end up with Plato. And this little guy here is about Zarathustra. And although it's just a little book, it's absolutely loaded. I'm going to show you something about that. And here is the Upanishads. Not all of them, but here is another idea where you have a teacher and a pupil and a conversation, and it reads a lot like the writings of Jesus. And I have some more stuff, which I'm not even going to have time to get into because they're way overdue, but we have the Shanama and the Rubiyat, Obormakayan, and they're relatively modern works, and I haven't even read them. I just know that anybody who wants to understand something of the history of many ancient religions, or philosophies, if you want to call them that, you have to include these. Here I've got, from the Jewish Publication Society. This is my own copy now. I found it at a bookstore recently, and it's a little different than all of the Bibles that I possess. And this, as I said, is based on the Masoretic text. So it's interesting because certain of the, the prophetess Ruth is not included. According to the Jews here. And I had to go back and get this one again, because I now have many Platos to look at. And what's interesting is that all three of these three Platos, first one published 1954, and it's from the third Jowett translation. This guy Jowett was the authority of the day. Benjamin Jowett. Here's another one. Works of Plato, translated by Jowett. Here's another. And here, in this particular copy, translated by Jowett, and this one is published, very old, this one, 1952, and I think the other one is actually as far back as 1930 something, if not 20 something. But this, is University of Chicago. And what's beautiful about this copy is it has a lot of information about Plato. And when you look at this, what do you find? And I unfortunately am not able to highlight this. In this particular copy, you'll see that the very first verse, temperance, Charmides, I suppose they translate into the same thing. But it starts at 153. Why did they start there? I don't know. And all three of these Platos are the work of the same man. Now we can go a little further back here. And when you get to the Timaeus and the Critias, here we have the Timaeus starting at verse 17. And, I would love to spend some time just reading this to you, because what these are dialogues, because these are all the dialogues of Plato. And so I wasn't sure at first if I was just going to settle on looking at whatever the differences were in all these three translations, because just like these Bibles, The order of these books is different. Some are not even in some of these, and I wonder were they specifically made for a group of people, and they only needed to know a little bit. And so that's the kind of thing we're up against even when we are comparing even these mythologies. And like I said, what I read to you earlier was from an introduction on the Mahabharata. But guess what, huh? The same thing. More of the same concepts, just tweaked a little differently. And boy, oh boy, does it make your head spin when you see how you get right back to the very same equations even. Now, the Timaeus is an amazing dialogue. It includes, let's see what it says, persons of the dialogue: Socrates, Critias, Timaeus, and Hermocrates. So these are some very famous names, and I can't even begin to talk about them. Of course, a lot of people are familiar with this movie called, I forget, some Kid's Great Adventure, and they have these historical figures and somehow managed to make a time machine and collect them all up. And I think they get Abraham Lincoln, and they call Socrates Socrates, and well, he's a very jolly fellow, and it's kind of it's got that kind of personality where you think of him as Yoda or something, he's some wise old guy. But in fact, Plato wrote about his teacher Socrates, who, of course, poisoned himself. He died much the same fate as John the Baptist, or rather the John of the Revelations. So, won't dwell on that too much, but this is some very intriguing discourse. It starts in verse 17, Timaeus, and it ends in, let's see, what verse did they use for this one? Verse 92. And why? Just listen to this. We may now say that our discourse about the nature of the universe has an end. The world has received animals, mortal and immortal, and is fulfilled with them, and has become a visible animal containing the visible. The sensible God, who is the image of the intellectual, the greatest, best, fairest, most perfect, the one, only begotten, heaven. Interesting. And this is Plato, who lived when? He was born in 428 BC. Interesting, because there's our timeline would place him contemporary with someone. I can't think of who at the moment. And I want to say Daniel in the Old Testament, but Daniel is a little older than this. Now, there's a Timaeus. Now, what's so great about the Critias, the very next chapter in this sequence? Well, it starts at 106. Now, here it is again, this version. And this is the beauty of philosophy, if you will. And I'm going to show you something about that very word, its root, some of its forms, and, well, how it has everything to do with just how multifaceted these ancient thinkers were. Because if you find out more about Plato himself, you'll see that he would be not only a statesman, but he would be like perhaps even Benjamin Franklin of his time, although we don't attribute any inventions to him. And of course, according to what's in the Critias here, everything that the great Athenians of recorded history ever achieved was just a wisp of what their ancestors had achieved. And this is the story of Atlantis in here. It talks a lot about the human race and where they came from, the gods, so forth described Atlantis. It's a very interesting thing to look at and analyze, and I could spend a whole day getting Google Maps out and all of that, and I may just go there. But here, let me show you something. This is the very end of the Cretaceous. And guess what? It ends in verse 121. Here's what it says, pretty much. And it is after it's talking about describing Atlantis and the inhabitants thereof and their lineage. And here it goes. I'm just gonna cut right in somewhere. Okay. But when the divine portion began to fade away, okay, here we go. By such reflections and by the continuance in them of a divine nature, the qualities which we have described grew and increased among them. But when the divine portion began to fade away and became diluted too often and too much with the mortal admixture, and the human nature got the upper hand, then they, being unable to bear their fortune, behaved unseemly. And to him who had an eye to see, hear that? Grew visibly debased, for they were losing the fairest of their precious gifts. But to those who had no eye to see the true happiness, they appeared glorious and blessed at the very time when they were full of avarice and unrighteous power. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law, and is able to see into such things, perceiving that an honorable race was in a woeful plight, and wanting to inflict punishment on them, that they might be chastened and improved, collected all the gods into their most holy habitation, which, being placed in the center of the world, beholds all created things. And when he had called them together, he spake as follows. In every version, anywhere printed, has to leave it off right there. Now I got my own copy of Plato, I had to do it. And I can color, or rather I can highlight this all I wish, and I'm going to, but where shall I leave this? Well, here I have the completed collected dialogues, the whole bloody thing. And these Java translations are in there as well. And I really do want to say more about that, but I'm running out of time, and I have to get these books to the library pretty soon before the SWAT team comes to get them, huh? Okay, there's so much more to cover, so much more mathematics to demonstrate, so many more samples of 153, and so much more. But I do want to show you these symbols, don't I? Where are they? Here they are. Let me just get this done here so I can feel satisfied. I just had no choice. This little thing here. Now this is going to require a whole other session or two to explain why it's so important. You can look at some of these illustrations in here. Look at that. Oh my goodness. See that? Well, that's in a Masonic building. But these guys might look a little familiar. And you see that? Those eagle-faced guys? And that other guy flying around? Why, there are pieces of them on just about everything you look at. And there's that, there's that pumpkin. I got another one here. Where is it? Oh, here's a beautiful one. I love this. Here, and I'm not sure where they're saying this came from. We do know that there is a version of this individual In an ancient Sumerian story, the guy's name was Upanishad or something. No, what's that? No, I don't know. But you'll notice that is not a kitty cat. That's a lion. That guy must be about, I don't know, pretty big. Anyway, every time this little guy opens his mouth, I have to imagine, is there something very similar about this? Okay. Now that's, oh, here's another one. Well, there's that little fish head, right? Look at that guy. Got a pine cone. And it just looks like a fish's head. That's just the way it looks. Because I don't know. Maybe it is, but that's interesting. There's so many other iconic symbols. And in this compilation of ideas, by a guy who admits that, you know, he's kind of throwing a lot of stuff together, but it's kind of an advanced idea. But I put this high on the list because I wanted to read something from here, and this one is not mine, so it's a little hard to just point out the interesting stuff so fast. I'll have to come back to this for sure. But this is about an ancient religion called Zoroastrianism, and usually when you find condensed versions like this, you'll find they do take a bit of liberty with what you would say, the shortcut version of things, and these aren't bad. For instance, this guy will say Osiris, Krishna, Buddha, Christ will be shown as different means for one and the same royal highway of final bliss, nirvana. And I'm not going to go on and on because this is the Maha Shohan. I don't know, but you'll notice here it says sacred almond is there. It looks like a Star of David or some triangles inside of each other or something. But yeah, it's like a universal symbol. And of course, is a Vedic concept. And here they've incorporated several religious symbols. But according to this, if you look into it, there are originally 12 distinct religions, and we're just coming back to some sense of understanding where we are in the universe and who we are. So, well, here it is. It says, Magianism, in the days of its full maturity and practice and long ages before the first of the 12 religions. Okay, so it goes on and on and on. What am I looking for here? I want to show you this because some of this is it's kind of really out there for anyone who doesn't really participate in this, and I'm just looking for it. Here we go. Here's an idea. Oh, no, this could be one of these ideas about the Virgin where you go to this place called the Shinbat Gate, and you wait there, and, well, let's look at this. At the end of the third night, as the dawn rises, that soul wends its way southward, inhaling the fragrance of orchards and the scent of the flowering shrubs, and he contemplates. Whence that fragrance, the sweetest ever breathed? And he sees approaching him a virgin pure, of 15 summers, some say 14, some say 16, as fair as the fairest thing of earth, handsome, radiant, heroic, stately, of appearance that attracts, of divine lineage, of the ancient seed of the Spirit. And the good soul questions her, Who art thou? The fairest maid I have ever seen. And the response is, I am thine own Dana. In parentheses it says, thine inner spirit self. Answers the maid, thou youth of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, good faith, I am thyself. Clad in those virtues bright, thou appear to others on earth, as now and here I appear to thee. And it goes on and on. It's a very beautiful thing. And so, could this be the origin of this version in heaven? Well, who knows? And of course, in the Quran, some versions will describe them as Horus pure. Horus, and it speaks to the eyes or something, black eyes. So, this is very interesting. But I want you to see that and share that with you, because if you're a bad person, and it's kind of like that that fun painting where, depending on how you look at it, there's a pretty lady. On the other hand, you get this other thing. Oh yes. So we won't even talk about it, but that's kind of what that is about. The gates, the pearly gates. This is very, very old stuff. Of course, they took that part out, and because in the Egyptian version, there's something else going on. The feather of Mot, and there's Sirius, the dog, and all these things come to us from so many different directions. And books such as what I'm, drawing from now. Here's another interesting symbol. Some refer to this as a symbol. Where's that go? As for the interdimensional portal, you'll find that on some buildings. And I could go on and on, because architecture is very, very, very interesting, because power. Wherever you find it throughout the world, it likes to speak about it. So, here's some more symbols. You notice that peacock down there? There's a story about the peacock how it came into the world. And it's kind of cute. I'll probably come back to this. I'm going to have to turn this book in again, because apparently there were 13 Sashoyans, or messiahs, in ancient times. And I'm just going to mention this because we'll notice that Abraham was in the land of the Chaldees after the flood. And God told him to get out of there. And the descendants of Abraham, Joseph and his brothers, 12 tribes, they wind up in Egypt. And then, of course, they begin their journey, their exodus, all the way through to a time when they had no king. And Nathan the prophet finally gives them soul, who yields to David, who eventually gives birth to Solomon. We've spoken about this, but there is a family tree there. And so many illustrations, we could go on and on about that. But what's important to really get about this idea is that philosophers and magicians were the scientists of the day. In fact, I'll not even go to this dictionary I have here, because first it will tell you that philo means love, the love of something. And, a philosopher loves to study learning. And philology, and I think, what is the other one? Is used to be called philology. Now it's called linguistics. And today, we have a new subject called neurolinguistics. But whatever science, cutting edge science of the day, whatever it was, great powers, when they took over new parts of the world and they expanded their territories, they always made it a point, and we do to this day. World War II is a good example of that. We bring the expertise over to our side. Now, what's curious about the way this whole subject is treated, whole cloth, in the Christianic, Judaic, Greco-Roman system. Let's look at it. The Israelites go into Egypt. They come out. Abraham starts in the land of Chaldees. So later on, when they're captured by the Babylonians, what does the king order? In Daniel 1, verse 5, I'll read it. He says, they'll be nourished for 3 years. There's your 1, 5, 3. For 3 years, that they could stand before the king, and that they would learn the language of the Chaldeans. Now, run into space, there's something about that. And it's the way this Old Testament, the Torah itself, is just packed with layers of detail. We just stop and look at things from another perspective. Because we're going to find out why 23. It's highlighted all right. You know why? Of course, we do know why. Well, because there are 23 chromosomes in our DNA. Everything else, something different. The only people have 23. Yeah. And something really interesting happens at something called the 19th half-life. Anyway, there's something about some of these ancient scriptures, for instance, Plato, and I don't know which one of these is in Timaeus Critias, mentions that once upon a time people were hermaphrodites. And when you go back maybe to talk about Atlantis, or what probably is the Minoan Empire. Truly. And that's why when it mentioned in the Quran that water gushed forth in the oven, well, yeah, you extrapolate quite simply that, since the earth was the lowest point in any inhabitation at this ancient time, things overflowed and went right into the earth. Gushed out. But another plausible explanation is that, and it's recorded, they know, that earthquakes destroyed Crete, but not before a series of gigantic tsunamis. And the cause of the tsunamis was pretty much something along the order of magnitude of a volcano that split the islands that are now Sumatra and Java. Those two islands come together into one giant volcano. The lid blew off it completely. The earth went into a cold spill for several years. Of course, it just killed everybody around the area of the island, and temperatures plummeted. Many things went bad. We also know that a lot of worldwide disasters are coincident with volcanic eruptions. So, in any event, the Santorini Islands, which, if you want to look at concentric rings, which are described in the Timaeus, in the Critias rather, There's the Cyclades, another ring of islands. And if you Google that, and imagine you're coming down from space, zero in the coordinates, and you zoom in closer and closer, you actually will see rings. Look like that. And of course we know that Knossos existed. So much more to say about that. But you don't see where they're going. But they were destroyed because of the tsunami. There was probably, I don't know, no real advance warning like we would have. And the island itself, what's interesting, was not fortified as any other Bronze Age settlement. It was apparently like, you know, how can I put it? Well, the jewel, the crown, at the center of the empire, which ruled everybody. So we have to look at what Plato says and think about that. You know, but let's face it, we know that at the 6th week of gestation, all the things that must happen in order to differentiate are all the things that govern the total or sometimes not quite complete differentiation into distinct male and female types. It takes place right there. If not, for the distinct difference between the male and the female, what we say gametes, you know, the cells that are not quite complete, just a half. These are reproductive units. Called gametes, I believe. They're incomplete. And so, those, the union of those two things, once that happens, of course, it starts to complete that process, just like dominoes. You know, bang. Once that one cell meets the other cell, and there's an environment to take hold. And all life is based on that same principle. In fact, that table, I mean, back there, if you look at, you know, it's this repeating digit column. It's just like an organic compound of some kind that just keeps replicating itself. Every strand can be folded back into the previous one, almost completely. The net folds back in. Something to think about. And I probably am really off track now. I did want to talk about philosopher again, didn't I? Let me read this right out of the book. Otherwise, it's probably not really realistic. Here's in my favorite pastimes through the dictionary. Remember? There you go. Philosopher. Okay, a person who studies or is learned in philosophy. 2. A person who lives and thinks according to a system of philosophy. 3. A person who meets difficulties with calmness and composure. And that would definitely be Socrates, wouldn't it? And 4. I think this means obsolete, ancient, something like that. An alchemist. Magician. You see that? Think about it. There are so many things to understand. The order in which things take place in the Bible. For instance, creation takes place in chapter 1 in Genesis. They recant it again. And it's kind of interesting the way they recant it, because I'm going to read that to you. You'll see this. tiny software here. Why 23? Making sure we get this. Perhaps. And the 53rd verse, I believe. I have to double check that. But here's some more about philosopher. There we go, yeah. Philology. What does it say? Origin, the love of learning and literature. Study scholarship. Study of written records, etc., etc., etc. Early term for linguistics. Here's another one. I said that, didn't I? Well, here's an example. Philosopher's stone, an imaginary substance sought for by alchemists and believed that it would change base metals into gold or silver. Well, there may be something true about that, but the magic, the alchemy, that can be found in the Bible. It may in fact be completely related to numbers itself. For instance, I want to go there, probably I should mention it while I'm at it, but let's look at a number like 7, 8, 9. Kind of curvy, you know. You look at number 1, you think of Moses' staff. And you think of the snake itself. What does the snake represent? It can mean a lot of things. But if you study, I guess what they would call neuroscience, study the brain. There's a 4-part stage of human development, maybe all animals, but we're looking at humans in this case, but it's 4 parts, central nervous system, and it's remarkable. These symbols that we see really resemble certain aspects of which we couldn't see with the naked eye. It's that small. So we have these ancient symbols, a staff of one kind, maybe an Egyptian motif somewhere. But imagine Moses' staff, for instance. Anyway, getting back to the snake. There's an unfolding that takes place. And there's a telencephalon, diencephalon, mesencephalon, and mesencephalon. I get confused about these terms. I'm no expert. I just saw these things and I forgot already. But and then there's this idea that everyone is speaking to God in the very beginning. But are they actually vocalizing? Not necessary, is it? Do we know for sure that people can have telepathic abilities? And we'll notice that, there are various ways God communicates with his prophets, as, illustrated by Moses, Abraham, Joseph, Daniel. So many instances in these 9s and 11s, 19s. We'll bear these things out. But they're also illustrating other things as well. And I'm just going to throw this out there right now, but once you get comfortable with this identity principle and an idea of equivalent statements, sometimes you want 0, sometimes you want 1. We don't need to get into these ideas, Cartesian planes and axes and so forth, and other kinds of 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional arrays. So many different paths you can go down, but some of these ideas are kind of in here, in these Bibles and other stuff. In addition to some very profound common sense passionate thinking, and illustrations, of course, on every manner of misconduct. And levels of, you know, mistaken concepts of self-worth. Solomon is a great thing to really absorb if you read, or, the book of Ecclesiastes. I believe that's the one, 31. 31? Where's that Proverbs? Oh, I'm still confused. So I'm starting to drift out now. I want to say more about that snake, didn't I? Well, the snake makes his debut in an interesting place. And we'll notice that at another, well, just after that, the man and the woman's eyes are opened. And there may be some more interesting quantum ideas of knowing, not seeing, and maybe numbers in different bases, perhaps. We'll bear this out as well. So, I think I'm ready to take these books back. We didn't do justice to any of them, truly. And I had hoped to read a lot more, but I spent a lot of time perhaps rambling around. Didn't even get to the good part. Well, I did cover a little bit about what could be the story of Atlantis. Well, it is explicit in Plato. This might be some link between this event, Noah's Ark, and the Quran, disappearance of, I don't know. I'm just saying, anything's possible because our time references are way off. For instance, the Nazca lines, which have been around, they say they have some idea how long they've been out there, but it's kind of funny because it's out there is a monkey with 9 digits. Yeah, we'll think about that for a minute. Yeah, they're calling us monkeys. Anyway, they sure busted out our number 9, didn't they? I'm going to stop right there and kind of clean up my act and quit worrying about these library books and get them back. And we'll get back to some real quality analysis. We've got to look at Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Daniel. Like I said, there's distributive laws and all these other things, and so many. Just number games, if you want to call it that, which some people would look at as an god-awful math, but when you see how easy it really is, especially if you're already wrestling with the burden. Too many numbers. Yeah, I think so. Okay. I'm going to let it go now. And good night.